Happy Father's Day to you all, especially the fathers. Before we get started, we'll ask David Carroll if he'll say us a prayer.
Our Father, thank you for this very beautiful morning, especially now that we stay together with your word. We pray that you will all remember where you bear from your word and help us keep our minds there on the best. We pray all these be the ones that are on and be out there on the pillars. We pray that you will help us get all their sins and they can come back with us, but as you will. We pray now that you will in our class this morning.
Thank you, David. If you was paying attention to the announcements Wednesday night, I said Lloyd to be up here this morning, but we've traded, so you got me today. So if you're looking forward to Lloyd, come back next week. The subject today is serving with the deacons. It's every subject we've had this week, and I've got my songbooks laid up here because I know I like to wander, and so I don't want to look back behind me. So I got my songbooks, and I was just getting ready to go past, and I looked down, hey, there's a songbook. What's it doing there for? Right? So I'm trying to stand between. So I guess if you really wanted to see me, I guess I will try my best. So I'm not making no promises to those that will watch this later, or if anybody happens to be that has the password watching it live that is shut in. I apologize ahead of time, but I will try to stay in the camera, but I am a mover. I don't like sitting still. But anyhow, the subject today is serving with deacons. It'll be a little bit before we get there, but if you want to, you can go ahead and turn to Exodus chapter 18 is the first scripture that I will be reading from. It's one of the first things I thought of when I was studying for this that come to my mind. When we think about things in life, and like I said, when I was studying for this, one of the things that I thought about was one of the scenarios that I come up with was, how many of you have ever ate at a restaurant? Okay, pretty much everybody, right? Yeah, when I was growing up, we didn't go out that much restaurant-wise. It was at 4:50 p.m. we was eating supper. Why 4:50? Because my dad got home about 4:40. He got up at 4 o'clock. It took him 40 minutes to get home. 4:50, that was when supper was ready. He got home, cleaned up a little bit. We ate at the supper, that table, pretty much every night. That's how it was when I was growing up. But anyhow, nowadays, we all have our favorite places to eat. There might be some place that you go to eat that you walk in the door. And when I say restaurant, I mean, I call it a sit-down restaurant. Most places you do sit down, whether it's fast food or not, but a restaurant, you sit down and you get served. And if you've noticed our theme so far, the first word is serving in all of them. But anyhow, when we go to that restaurant, it might be a place you frequent a lot. You go inside and they greet you by name, ask you how you're doing, might ask you how your kids are doing because they know you, and so on. You get set right down. You get to the table that's maybe a preferred table because they know you and you eat there a lot, and you get to sit there. Waiter, waitress, whatever we're going to call them, server for today. Server comes out, gets your drink order, gets your food order. You're in and out there pretty quick, and you go out the door and you say, my, that is the best restaurant in town, right? You think, I got served quick, the food was great, everything went perfect. But say today you go in there today. Every time it's been like that up to this point. You walk in through the door, and there's no one there to greet you. Not no big deal, They're busy. You think, I know what table they're going to set me at. You just walk over there yourself and plop right down, right? And you're sitting there looking around. There's other people sitting there. Some people with food, some people with drinks. No big deal. They'll get to you when they get to you. You look around, and finally, you see the one person that you recognize walking 10 times faster than they normally do, going from table to table to table. And you think, boy, they're really busy, They're really energetic and stuff like that. And then you're sitting there, and it goes a while, and they still haven't come up to your table. Do you start to think, or you just sit there when you think about it? Up to this point, everything's always went smooth when you've went there. You've sat there, always had good service, always been treated well. They know you. You're somebody at this point. but you sit there. So then you get to start to thinking, what's some of the things that you can do? Well, one thing you can do is sit there and wait some more, right? Be patient. Have you ever thought to yourself, boy, they should really hire more people around here? Have you ever thought about that? I'm sure all of us have been guilty of that at one time. There's no one that really wants to work. That's why we're waiting here so long, right? You have things like that. Your choice could be to get up and walk out. And as you walk out, there's 3 or 4, we're hiring signs, things like that. Or another choice you could do is you've ate there before, they've always treated you well, and you see that poor man or woman running frantically to try to keep up, you could offer to help. That's the other thing you could do. Those are all valid choices you're allowed to make. But when I think about it, when I seen the topic, of course, we got to see the topic earlier than you guys did as far as the serving. When you think about serving, sometimes people get it's a one-time thing. I did my service today. I can remember calling Morrison one time, and I think he said it wasn't his idea, but it was called checkbook. You do your check mark Christian thing. Well, I've did this today. I've said 2 prayers. I've helped one person across the street. You get that check mark in there, and I've done my good deed for the day. And that's not how the serving is supposed to be. When we think about it, I think of it more of a marathon. If you guys look at me, you can tell I've never run a marathon. I used to always say someone bigger is going to have to be chasing me for me to run. Nowadays, I say I'll take a good beating over than even having to run. That is just my saying, because it's just not thing. I can remember I went to give blood one time at work. I think my pulse was like 40-some beats a minute. And the woman goes, "Are you a runner?" And I started laughing. I said, "Do I look like a runner?" And she chuckled. But anyhow, I'm getting off subject here like I do upstairs, so I need to quit that. But anyhow, when we think about that marathon, is there's certain aspects of running a marathon. You have to prepare for it. There's not too many people that line up that morning and say, "I'm going to run a marathon," that hasn't planned or hasn't built their stamina up, because if they haven't, guess what? They're more than likely not going to make it. And there's always exceptions to that rule, but majority of them have already trained and all that stuff. But then when they get to the end, everything's good. They're happy about their accomplishments. They've made it to the end. They've finished what they've started. But sometimes the hardest part is in between that start of that marathon and the finish of that marathon. That's when the real work really, really happens, because you can be running that race, and you can start thinking, "Boy, this is really difficult. I'm just going to walk off to the side. I'm going to quit." Or you can push yourself through. There's times when people get injured. They might fall down, break something. They can't finish it, but they've tried their hardest. They've wanted to finish, but physically they weren't able to. That's the part in the middle, I think, that when I think of serving is when it really gets down to it. The training part might be fun for some people. You're not doing the whole thing, but really the middle between, the start and the finish is where the serving part comes in. I like how each subject, the first week Todd said serving like Jesus. Last week, here he was serving as one body. And this is serving with deacons. The reason why I said the middle part is there's always a serving. Everything you're going to see this summer says serving, and there's going to be an end part. So far we've done Jesus, we've done body, and today we'll have deacons. The middle word today is with. Of course, there's more than one middle word in some of these, but the middle word's with. I want you to really think about that word with. It's something that there's a reason why it says with. Like I mentioned, the server in the restaurant. Can they do it? Yeah, they can. But at the end of the day, if they end up running like that all day long, what's going to happen to them? Burnout, like Mark said. get burnt out. They'll get tired, right? What happens when someone gets tired? Why do you think they was the only server in the restaurant that day? Maybe everybody else had a day like that, right? And they said, you know what? It is not worth it wearing myself out on this. Why am I the only one? So like I said, I want you to focus on that word with. It's there for a purpose. Okay, Exodus chapter 18, as I mentioned earlier. We're going to start in verse 10. I'm going to read pretty lengthily to get the whole story out here. It's verse 10. I'm going to read down through 23. So Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to beat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. The next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, 'What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone? And all the people stand around you from morning till evening.' And Moses said to his father-in-law, 'Because the people come to me and inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another. And I make them know the statutes of God and his laws.' Moses' father-in-law said to him, 'What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace.'" Hopefully this gives you an idea of what I was thinking of when this was one of the first things that I thought of was happening. Moses thought he was doing the right thing. And was he doing the right thing by trying to keep people from being upset with each other? Absolutely. Should we try that? Yes, we should try that. But his father-in-law, he was a priest from Midian, so I'm sure he's had some experience. It's always nice to talk to people that have had experience in certain things. You don't want to do things with someone that doesn't have knowledge of something. You don't want someone building your house that's never built a house before, that has had no training. I can remember a guy years ago, this guy should have had training, but anyhow, he had this guy build a house, and he brought another guy that had a lot of experience in construction from work that did it doing the side jobs and stuff, and he brought him there. He asked him, he said, "What can I do to fix this?" The top of the door was 29 inches wide, and the bottom door was 26. It was that far off because the person that he thought would do a good job wasn't there, and he put people in charge of it that didn't care. And the guy's reply goes, "How can I fix it?" He goes, "It'd be cheaper to tear it down and start over with again." He goes, "I hate to tell you that. You're several $1,000s into it, and it comes with experience." Here, Jethro was telling Moses, "Yeah, you can keep doing this, but it's not good. Is it not good that he's doing it, or is it not good for Moses that he keeps, from morning till night being the only one to decide how these things go?" Of course, we know Moses, he led the people out. He had God with him the whole time. That's who you would really want to make these decisions. But guess what? There were other people. Remember, Elijah said, there's only so many, I'm the only one left. No, he wasn't, but it sometimes can feel that way. And I'm sure in his mind that he felt that way. And of course, it says here it says, of course, it mentions, the men. In verse 21, it says, look for able men from all over the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place them over the people. You want to put people that people can trust. When it comes to that trust, you have to earn that trust. I'm not asking for any names here, please, okay? So don't even shout any names, okay? But I'm sure each and every one of us knows someone that if you want it to be spread around, I know this at work, the old, of course, nowadays, if you're so young, you wouldn't have any idea what a telegram is or, telegraph or anything like that. But you always do this in a telephone, and then you put tele and then the person's name. That was a joke years ago. There's certain individuals, that no matter what, they can't help themselves. If they have any information that they think that makes them feel, hey, I know something you don't know, but then I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it. Moses is in that place of trust. That's why it said put trustworthy men in those spots. Let's go ahead and turn to Acts. And this is why I brought something to drink, because when I get to talking, you think as much as my mouth runs, I'd never get dry. Let's turn to Acts chapter 6. When we think about it, I've known individuals over the years that they go looking for that perfect congregation. Notice I say that on purpose, congregation. When we go looking for that perfect church, the church itself, the establishment of it, how God's designed it, it is perfect. But the individual members of it all fall short. We all sin. But anyhow, people will look for that perfect, congregation, that one that does everything the right way, takes care of everybody the right way, doesn't forget anything, doesn't make mistakes. That's one thing for certain is I know people that will never ever want to say I've never made a mistake. I say at work a lot. If I was to say I never made a mistake, I'd be lying every day. I make mistakes every day as far as, whether work or anything like that. It's how you handle it and how you find it through. People that look for that perfect congregation that does everything right, we'll find here earlier on in chapter 6 of Acts. This is the early establishment of it. You think, my guess is on the day of Pentecost, Peter preached. My guess is it doesn't say it in the Bible. This is me. Please do not. I'm just me saying, but I'm sure the first complaint was registered the next day, or maybe later on that day, because something wasn't done right. It comes natural. There's nothing wrong with having concerns. It's just that if it's not life or death, I've always told them this work. If it's not life or death, guess what? Is it really that big of a deal? If someone paints something red and you should have thought it should have been blue, is it really that big of a deal? It's not going to hurt anything. It's things that we have to look over, those little things here. This was not really necessarily a little thing, too. So let's start in Acts chapter 6. We're going to read the first 4 verses for right now. It says, now in these days, when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists arose against the Hebrews. The Hellenists, they were the Greek-speaking Jews. And of course, we know the Hebrew was the Hebrew language of the typical. It says, arose against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in the daily distribution. And the 12 summoned the full number of the disciples and said, it is not right that we should give up preaching the word of God to serve tables. Therefore, brothers, pick out from among you 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, whom we will appoint to this duty, but we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. Here we see someone saying, hey, you're treating this person, but you're failing to treat this person. Did the apostles think that they were above serving tables? I would certainly hope not. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that, hey, we've got to do certain things. We have to spread the gospel. And that is good. That is what they should be doing. They could stop and serve tables. They could do that. But then what happens? Do we see a lot of need in today's world? There is an organization after organization after organization for people that are willing to do something. They will find something. And there's nothing wrong with being in outside organizations. Those are important too. But what you have to watch out for is when you think that organization is more important than God. Now, do these widows and stuff need fed? Absolutely, they do. We should try to treat everybody equally. Now, if we know the history, which I hope we do, is there was systems in place that, there's a reason why Samaritans, they were half Jewish, because of what we studied in Isaiah. You get people pulled out, the poor was left behind, and then you brought new people in and they got intermixed, marriages and stuff like that. And I'm not talking about race there. I'm talking about intermixed as far as, religions and stuff like that. They get the intermix, and so the full-blooded Jewish people look down upon them. You notice it said the Hellenists. It didn't say the widows in general. It didn't say the widows on this side of the street was okay and this side was on the other. It was a certain specific one. We don't know because it's not told us. We don't know if it should have been addressed saying, hey, let's treat them all fairly, but also what was going on. They were doing the same thing that Jethro seen with Moses. They were coming to the apostles with all their issues. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is absolutely how, if you've got an issue, you should be able to come to somebody and talk to them. But, sometimes it's good for us to say, hey, we need some help. Those we're hiring signs, there's always, something out there. I guarantee if you ask anybody in here that's doing something around the building here or around their home, if you've got some spare time and they say, hey, would you like some help? How many of them is going to take you up on it? A lot of them are, aren't they? But you first have to do that with, that middle word. When you have to do it, you have to be that with part. You have to be willing to be there to try to help them through the situation. We see in James that it says, we also have to be willing to do good. It's easy to say, hey, I can pray for you. How hard is it to pray? We've got that avenue. People don't take advantage of it. Prayer's powerful, yes. But if someone's hungry and you say, I'll pray that you'll get some food, when you've got food in your house standing behind you when someone comes and you don't give them that food, that's where the problem is. When we see something that needs to be done, we should be doing it. The reason I pause is because I got something always pops in my head. I don't know why. It's how my mind works. But, when it comes to, I'm looking back here. I'll be honest with you. I couldn't tell you contribution numbers. I don't pay attention to them. I've always figured in my household, if I've got it to do, I'll do it. If I don't, I don't. That's just plain and simple. But with that being said, sometimes we take our contributions and say, hey, I'm going to give this to the congregation to use it for its purpose. And then you see someone out in public that might need some help, or a neighbor, and you say, well, I've already given it to the congregation. Let me call them up. When you've got the ability to help them, that's, things that we need to think about here. It says here, this is the complaint. It says it's sometimes necessary to address situations. In this case, it is. The other thing that needs to be picked up here is the apostles weren't saying that was beneath them to help out, but they've got issues to address. And then if they can appoint someone else that is able-bodied to be able to do that role in an effective manner, that is a good way of doing it. You want to spread the wealth, as they say. You want to spread the work around. Does everybody know who does everything here behind the scenes here? More than likely not. There's things that happen around here I don't have a clue who does, but I certainly appreciate it. But the thing is we have to realize is if something doesn't, all of a sudden you start seeing something, well, they're not doing this anymore. How come? Have you thought about, you know what? Let me ask, and maybe I can be the one to do that. It's stuff that we have to be willing. Once again, it's serving, not being served, that we need to always remember in all these lessons this summer, is there's a difference between the word serving and served. It says, Acts, in the third verse, it says, who can be, I put on who can be a deacon. This is, you might as well say the early part of it here in Acts 3. It says here in verse 3, it says, therefore, brothers, pick out from you 7 men of good repute. Wonder why 7? Anybody have any idea 7? What was the number 7 to Jews? What's that? Complete. 7 was complete. Is that why they picked 7? Could have been. It doesn't really say, but that would be my saying. If I was going to say guess, I'm going to say guess. It's a complete number. It says, men of good repute, full of the spirit and of wisdom, and whom we will appoint to this duty. Let's turn back to 1 Timothy chapter 3. And we're going to start in verse 8. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 8. First part of 1 Timothy chapter 3, it talks about overseers, bishops, everyone you want to call it, elder, and all that stuff, as far as Titus chapter 1 also is that. But here, this is the place we find qualifications for deacons. Start in verse 8. It says, deacons likewise must be dignified, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, not greedy for dishonest gain. They must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. And let them also be tested first, then let them serve as deacons. If they prove themselves blameless, their wives likewise must be dignified, not slanderers, but sober-minded, faithful in all things. Let deacons each be the husband of one wife, managing their children and their own households well. For those who serve well as deacons gain a good standing for themselves and also great confidence in the faith that is in Christ Jesus. Just talk about a few of the qualifications. One of the first things, it says blameless. I know we've talked about this before, and I've mentioned this before in teaching. When it comes to the role of elder and stuff like that, it says above reproach. That's always caused an issue for me, because when you think of someone that's blameless and above reproach, instantly we go to what? Perfect, and we know no one's perfect. So when we look at this, and of course one of the biggest qualifications is it says men, a husband of a wife, so that means it's a married man. Why is it a man? I don't know. That's what God wanted it, because that's what He told us. If you want to know the real reason, wait till after Judgment Day, and if you really still want to know, I'm sure He would answer that for you. I can't answer that for you, but if we know that's what He wants, that's what we have to go by. But anyhow, when we look at these qualifications, it's a person of good, we can say good repute, has is morally upright and all that stuff. But with that being said, it says here, it has to, verse 9 says, they must hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. I'm not going to name names, but I can name names of people that I know of that aren't Christians, that are morally upright, that do the right things, that I see them involved in things that help people out. They take their free time and they do good things, and it's great. And they don't do it for recognition. They do it because they truly want to help other people. But why does it say they have to hold to the faith? Anybody think why? Who are they serving in this point? They're serving their fellow Christians, but ultimately, who are they serving? God and Lord, yes. That's who we're serving. That's what we have to remember. Yes, is it good? Yeah, we go back to Acts chapter 6. Do we want to feed those that need fed? Absolutely. Do we want to clothe people that need clothed? Absolutely. there might be people in here that doesn't know we have a food pantry here. All you have to do is call. We have that. It happens a lot, but it's nothing that we have to spout about and advertise and stuff like that as far as saying, hey, this is how good we're doing it. It's just something that gets taken care of. That happens a lot in this congregation. That's one thing that I have gotten to see a lot more of, that we take for granted how blessed we are and not realize that it's God that has blessed us, and we need to not forget that. But when we think of these qualifications, that they have to be, have a good reputation, more upright, but they also have to be faithful. They have to know that, God's the one in control. Even though they're supposed to be blameless, that doesn't mean they're sinless. And of course, it says here that they have to have have a wife and children. So that kind of narrows the focus on some qualifications. And like I said, that's how God wanted it, that's how He designed it, and that's what we need to go by. I'm doing pretty good on time. So we've got 10 minutes. So verse 6 and 7, if we go back to Acts chapter, or excuse me, not 6, 7, 5 through 7 in Acts chapter 6. And what they said pleased the whole gathering, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and from the Holy Spirit, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. These they set before the apostles, and they prayed and laid their hands on them. And the word of God continued to increase, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests became obedient to the faith. In these last few verses, this is what how I've come up with it, and I certainly, if you guys haven't thanked Him yet, these sheets, I've got the paper here. I set it in front of me just in case I needed some backup, but I haven't. Michael has done a really good job of giving you an outline to look at for you to get your thoughts just started and things like that. We're speaking on deacons today. He's our education deacon, and all of our deacons have areas. I'm going to put the commercial in right here. Is there more things that we could do? Absolutely, but guess what? There's only so much time in the day. There's only so much things we can do. If there is a need that you see that's met, especially the men of the congregation that meet these qualifications, if there's something you would be willing to help out with, we would greatly appreciate it. And not to put that as far as just the deacons, but I can tell you as far as the women of this congregation, we are blessed in that too, because you probably don't, most of you don't know, and I know you don't do it for this reason, but when we go, when I go to visit people and stuff like that, they'll say, hey, so-and-so was here, they're here, and stuff like that, and that just makes their day. So don't think that you might think, I'm just visiting for a few minutes. It's not that big of a deal. I've, people that go talk to them for a few minutes, that can be a long day sitting there, by yourself, a little bit of interaction. It goes a long way as far as that goes, and that is definitely needed also. But once again, I'm saying this because don't expect becoming a deacon doesn't automatically give you all the free time in the world that guess what? I don't get 28 hours in a day. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. I'm not complaining. Please don't take it. Sorry. I'm not complaining. Please do not take it that way. I did. Tom, he's complaining. I've got the same amount of time that each and every individual has. Sometimes I wish I was maybe a little bit more organized, and that's something maybe I could work on. There's things that I wish I had more time to do. I know there's people that sometimes, I always jokingly say this, I'm not going to mention any names, and it's not my wife, okay, so please don't. feel that I have more free time than other people do. It's amazing to me how much free time other people, think that. I might think you've got all kind of free time. I might say, well, you're retired. You got all the free time. Oh, it's free time. Well, guess what? You have obligations and stuff you need to fulfill. So when someone steps into the role of deacon, that doesn't automatically say they've got all kind of free time. That means that they're willing to take the lead in something. Once again, that word with, right? A deacon in some of the roles is to not just lead, but also do some of the work, but also organize some of that work. That with part, like I mentioned, Michael doing all this right here. If you really want to help Michael out, sign up to be a teacher. Because I guarantee you, because at one point I was in that role, before him, when it come time for a new quarter and you had 3 spots open, you're thinking, what am I going to do? You start getting that thought. You're thinking, you know what? Is it really going to affect you for 3 months to try it out? You may not like it. You may end up loving it. But if you never try it out, guess what? You're never going to find out. I guarantee you, if you would go up to him today and say, hey, sign me up for the next time. I really want to try this. I guarantee you would make his day. It's once again, like I said, is it beneath the apostles to serve tables? Absolutely not. But guess what? They can't, you can't do it all. Everyone needs sleep. Everyone needs to take care of the things they need to take care of. The time doesn't stop for any of us. It says here, I wrote on here, having deacons allows the elders to focus more on the spiritual. And this is what I wrote down here at the end. I think I've got about 5. Well, I might have a little bit more. That watch is a little bit quick, so I got plenty of time. It says, how can we help deacons? I put on here, continue to verbally thank them and also help them in their assigned works. Does anybody know here where you can find where some of the assigned works for our current deacons are? I know Tracy does. We got it posted out here. You know what else is posted out there? The teachers for each quarter and what they're teaching, at least, and stuff like that. There's information on these bulletin boards out here. That's for anybody that they're posted there for a reason. We've got assignments posted for them. If you look in the deacon one, because we had more at one time, there are some empty slots. There's people that have more than one. It's once again, each and every one of us only have so much time in each and every day. It's 24 hours. And someone can go more than 24 hours being awake, but guess what? Our bodies aren't designed for that, and eventually they will break down. I don't like seeing people get frustrated because I've been there myself at times, if I'm being honest. And you think, how am I going to get this, and this done when I've got this and this and this to do? They always say how can you put 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack? And it's not very careful. It's not the right answer, okay? It just can't happen. So please continue to thank the deacons. And once again, more importantly, offer them a hand in the roles. If you've got a day off here and there and you're looking for something to do, call them up. Say, hey, is there anything I can do? They may not have nothing. I don't know. But at least offer. And more than once. I was thinking that when I was studying for this a couple weeks ago. You can say, hey, call me if you need anything. And then next thing you know, it's nice to have a continue to say, hey, call me. A couple weeks, hey, is there anything you can think of at this time? Please ask them. I've already did this, but I wrote it down. It says for the men of the congregation, well, I guess I take that back. This is for the men of the congregation when asked, and this is, excuse me, I'm about to get a drink of water. Actually, it's tea. I've got tea to take to my mom's house, and I didn't bring a bottle of water. But anyhow, for the men of the congregation, when asked, and normally it's either a deacon or we have other men of the congregation that have stepped up to help take some of the responsibility, not responsibility, but some of the work away from the deacons. It's when to help in worship services, reply with a yes, unless you're not physically able to or not qualified to do. When there's, the bell's rung, and, of course the bell don't ring when services start, but when someone comes up to you that's in charge and there's a couple minutes to go and they say, hey, can you do this, this, or this? Nope, not going to do it, and you walk away. To me, that's frustrating. And the way I look at it is you guys have heard me say public prayer. I'm not good at public prayer. But guess what? The only person I have to satisfy is God. We talk about repetitive, sayings, flowery speeches and stuff, because that can sound good. If that's on that person's heart, that's what they need to say. But the thing, the luxury is a prayer doesn't have to be. I'm glad we say now opening and closing. What used to be called the opening prayer? You guys ever remember that? What I've heard it said too? Starts with an M, ends with an N. Main, right? Main prayer. Ooh, that means it's more important, right? Every prayer is important. There's no certain length. If it's someone has that on their heart and that's what they want to talk about, that is great. If all person can get up there and do is say, thank you, God, for everything you've given to us, and sit back down, guess what? If that's what's on your heart, that's all it takes. I can tell you, I used to say, your private prayers will help you in your public prayers. I'm telling you right now, still, that's not the case. I can get up there and my mind goes blank. I've talked to, me and Harry have talked about this before. My private prayers are totally different a lot of times than my public prayers. I can tell you my my private prayers can go on for a long time. I'm more comfortable doing that because I know it's just me and God at that point. Like I said, for the men of the congregation, if you don't feel like you're qualified at this time, become qualified. Come up to me or Kurt or Bill or Todd or any of the men that you see participating in the open and say, hey, I need help with this. I can tell you right now, if they come up to me today and none of the song leaders that we have here today say, hey, Tom, we ain't got no song leaders. Are you going to sing? I'm telling you right now, I'm about to feel like I'm going nope and walking away, Would I do it? Yes. Would I do good at it? I know I would not. But guess what? I know how hard at times it can be for them to fill those last-minute roles. It is so much easier to say, you know what, whatever it takes. I went up to them before and said, hey, you got everything filled up, whatever you need at times. I don't do it all the time. I probably should. Once again, I've already said this. My third on the list was pray for them, and do that for them in their roles that they're filling right now. And I've already said this, I guess, because I think it was my number 2, but it was on the 4th. It's for the men of the congregation. Think about becoming a deacon. If you don't think you're qualified for it yet, once again, the same thing, everything else. Become qualified for it. If you don't want to see that one person getting wore out, that can happen. I've always said one of the first signs to me of a dying congregation is when you don't have enough people teaching Bible classes. Why are we here today? We're here today because God loves us. Jesus definitely loves us. He gave his life up for us. God allowed him to give his life up for us. And if we don't realize that if we don't teach the younger generations, how many of us have said, well, church is dying, and them young kids, they just don't want to come. Maybe because they've seen people that weren't willing to teach them by example. Please think about that. The other bell's going to ring here in a minute. Does anybody have anything else? Questions? Comments? If not, next week it'll be serving under elders. and Lloyd plans on being here for that. So please continue to keep him in your prayers. If not, we'll go ahead and be dismissed, and we'll get ready for worship services. Thanks.